everybody to SAMAG's seminar series. We do this monthly. This month we're talking about arts and disability. My name is Sarah Huboltz and I'm a SAMAG committee member and also the facilitator for today. Thank you so much all for your time, and thank you for being present here at 107 Projects and on the land that we gathered here today on. And so I want to pay my respects to the Gadigal people of the Aurora Nation and to elders past, present and future. We are talking today about the last Avant-Garde, about arts and disability in Australia. And so the context around arts and disability is that we've had several targeted initiatives in recent years. And in the last 5 years, we've seen a dramatic shift in the landscape in terms of people paying attention to us. Us as in the disability community, us as in disabled leaders and disability-led product and process. So we wanted to create a little bit of a snapshot, a little bit of a barometer of what's happening now and how we're measuring it, how we're celebrating it, what is the impact, what are the initiatives that are happening, and what is the value set that underpins them, and, you know, what are we doing well, what are we not doing well? So a really rounded conversation and a robust conversation around arts and disability. This is a disability-led panel. I am sight impaired. What that means is that I can't see you. Probably no one else can actually because of the lighting situation here, so win-win. What that means is we've got, the process for today is that I'll be facilitating and I'll also ask the panel members to audio describe themselves. We've got Auslan interpreters here and we're videoing. So when it comes to question time at the end of the seminar, when you want to ask a question, Adrian will have the roving mic and he will look out for your hand going up or an indication that you want to ask a question because I can't see you. That means that I won't be going, hey, over you over there, do you have a question? That'll be, you'll negotiate that on your own, like in the audience. So, without further ado, I really want to thank all the panellists who have come here tonight. I'm super excited about the eclectic mix of ideas and roles that we're all sitting in. We've got a very rich and knowledgeable panel for you today. And also, there's complete permission to ask any question that you want to ask at the end. The best thing for us is to not be shy and ask it in any way that you want to, and let's just get to the meaty stuff, because those of you who know me should know that I want to get right to the core of everything, and let's really pull this apart. So, let's introduce the panel members. As I said, my name is Sarah and I'm facilitating. I'm also an artist with disability as well as a SAMAG committee member and also an arts manager and access consultant. But I'm going to ask the panel members to introduce themselves, starting with the person on my left, Jackie. I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself, a basic, who you are, why you've come to this panel, and then I'm going to ask you to audio describe yourself just very briefly in terms of what you look like for anyone who can't see you.
No worries. So my name's Jackie Bailey, and I'd like to thank you for having me here tonight. I'm a researcher with a very small company called BYP Group. We're a specialist research company in the creative industries and the arts, and our passion is for diversity and inclusion research. So I'm pretty sure that's why I'm here tonight. So to audio describe myself, I generally like to say built for distance, not for speed. Short, glasses, Chinese Australian. If I was wearing a pair of overalls, I might look a little bit like a Chinese Winnie the Pooh. Awesome. But in a good way, like Winnie the Pooh, come on, right? Yeah, thank you.
So you have affectionate facial features.
Yes, I look very huggable, is where I'm going with that.
Wonderful. I realise I didn't do myself. I wear wigs, so today's hair is blonde and like that ombre kind of style and short with my Swarovski earrings on. I wear round glasses today. I have funny teeth. I just went to the dentist, so they're less funny now. I'm wearing a speckly blue and white dress, black shoes and a leather jacket.
Hi, I'm Kate Hood and audio describing myself would say I am a wheelchair user and I'm late middle-aged and I have short hair and I'm wearing black and red.
And who are you, Kate?
Who am I? I am a an artist. I am an actor and a writer and a director and a theatre maker, and I live in Melbourne. And I'm the artistic director of Raspberry Pool Productions in Melbourne, which is a company that I formed because there was a great big hole in the mainstream, everywhere actually, for a disability-led theatre company, and I thought somebody needs to do that. And then I did the Sync Leadership Intensive with Sarah, and I thought maybe that person should be me. So I did it. I'm also Deputy Chair of the Diversity Committee at Actors Equity and founder of the Performers with Disabilities Committee there.
Thank you. And to your right is?
Hi everyone, my name's Jack Dowdall. I am an aspiring writer for film and TV. I was a part of the Creatability Initiative as one of the interns, and where I worked with Goalpost Pictures, a production company that makes film and TV, obviously. To audio describe myself, I have brown hair, I'm average height, I guess, for a guy. I don't know, maybe short, who knows.
How many centimetres, Jack?
I think it's 167, although I may add 2 centimetres every now and then. Who knows, you know, just to prop it up. Right now I'm wearing a blue checked shirt, which is not quite a tablecloth, but you could kind of see it being one, and black chinos.
Thank you. And to your right is?
Oh, good evening, everyone. My name's Danielle Galotta. I work at the Art Gallery of New South Wales as the Access Programs producer. So firstly, thank you, Sarah, for inviting me this evening. At the Art Gallery of New South Wales, I led the Disability and Inclusion Action Plan. We developed that in 2016 with community consultation led by Accessible Arts, and we worked for 6 months with Sarah Holbert. So we're very proud to release that in 2017. In working in access programs, I'm very passionate about creating opportunities for disability-led programs, and I think that's why I've been invited this evening to talk about those initiatives. And to audio describe myself, I'm probably shy to say I'm a middle-aged lady, oval-faced, my hair swept up in a bun, I've got sparkly earrings on, brown eyes, and today I'm wearing a black pinafore with a white crisp shirt, I hope. Thank you.
Wonderful, thank you. So the context in Australia at the moment, what stimulated this discussion was recent research around arts and disability in Australia. So we're going to be drawing on that today. Also, the context is that there's been national research led by Kath Duncan at the University of Melbourne called The Last Avant-Garde, Disability and Performing Arts. She'll be releasing the team's findings on June the 4th in Melbourne. So if anyone's lucky enough to be down there, have a look at that event to see what those research findings are. And also, I'm really motivated as well and stimulated by a recent podcast that's come out as a collaboration between Disability Arts Online and Grey Eye Theatre in the UK. And their first podcast was released recently, interviewing Matt Fraser. And that podcast highlighted what was happening in the UK from the very, very beginning until now in terms of the trajectory of what caused the change in UK, what was needed in order to get the success stories that they see over there that we're aspiring to, because I know that we look towards them quite a lot, as well as creating our own initiatives. So that's research we can forward after this seminar, and we'll draw on during the seminar as well. So I've gathered the panellists together, and we've got a really nice mix of knowledge in the room. And I think the first question, what we're going to do is I'm going to ask the panel some questions first, and then we'll go to audience questions. So the first question I want to ask the fellow panel members is around inclusion. So let's just get a snapshot of our understanding to start with of the level of inclusion in Australia. It's a barometer question. So what is the level of inclusion in the arts for artists with disability right now? And I'd like to start with Jackie.
Okay, so I brought my cheat sheet because I kind of knew that would be my job. tonight.
I delegated.
She may have told me that beforehand. So I didn't do this research, so I can't take credit for any of it, but there is some excellent research around if you're curious. Particularly, there's a very good report done by the Department of Communication and the Arts, which came out towards the end of last year. It's the Council for Cultural Ministers report, I think it's called. So a lot of this research came from there. Some of it came from the Australia Council Connecting Australians report, which is the National Arts Participation Survey, which they do every few years. And some of it also came from David Throsby's most recent report on artists' incomes, making artwork, and that came out in 2017. So don't try and write all of that down. It's all, if you just Google arts research and disability Australia Council, they've got a fantastic summary page with all of that stuff on it. So just a few highlights just to set the kind of the scene from a data context. In terms of professional arts practice, according to the latest Throsby report, artists with disability are underrepresented. They earn less than their counterparts without disability, experience unemployment at higher rates, and are more likely to identify a lack of access to funding as a barrier for their professional development. So there's no surprises there. But what the percentages are, I can give you some of the top ones, I suppose. Artists with disability earn on average 42% less than their counterparts, which is not great because artists don't earn very much anyway. 1/3 of artists with disability experienced unemployment compared to 1/4 of artists without disability. In the general population, the unemployment rate is about 5%, and for people with disability, it's about 10%. So you can see it's higher in the cultural sector, but it is high for artists, general artists as well. Important to bear in mind. About 18% of Australians identify as having disability, so that's more than 4 million people. And by comparison, about 9% of practising professional artists identify with disability. And that varies quite significantly across art forms. So it's up to 14% of CACD artists, but it's only 6% of writers and directors like Jack. What else did I want to tell you that's sort of top of mind? Okay, so and also what I found interesting in the research was that in terms of funding applications, the Department of Communications and the Arts had a look at their Smarty grant applications and found that about 1/3 of applications overall were approved, and that rate was the same for disability-led applications. So artists with disability in that stream apply for financial assistance at the same rate as artists without disability, but they are more likely to identify a lack of access to finance and to funding as a barrier for professional development. So we need more research there in terms of what it is across all the agencies and not just DCA, because DCA I don't think that included the Australia Council, although I could be corrected about that. One or two other points, and then I'll hand over to the far more interesting panel members. So in Screen, in 2016, Screen Australia did a major report called Seeing Ourselves, which is about several different aspects of diversity, including disability and cultural diversity, and a couple of other categories of diversity. And in that study, they looked at TV drama productions from 2011 to 2015. So there were about 200 productions in that period. And they found that just 4% of the main or recurring TV characters were portrayed as having an identified disability. Not all of those people were played by people with a disability, because that's one of the things that will happen you'll see quite a lot in casting, is that people without a disability can act as someone with a disability, but it will never happen in reverse. You'll almost never get disability blind casting, I suppose you could call it. About 10% of the programs included at least one character with disability. So that's 20 programs of those 200 programs. Interestingly, most of the characters with a disability appeared on Neighbours or Home and Away, because that's so much of TV production, right, in Australia. But in those shows, so it was 77% of those characters, but in those shows, the characters' disabilities were not a normal part of that fictional world, if you know what I mean. They were, they kind of suddenly had memory loss or psychosis or whatever it was. It was for dramatic effect. I mean, the report still says, that's still great, but that's something to bear in mind. I mean, it's still great that at least they're doing it, but it's not really normalising it in people's lives. I will stop there. I have so much more data I could share, but maybe at a more relevant point.
There's two things that I'm reminded of with those points. One is that there is a woman in the US, a Palestinian American woman, young woman, and she did a TEDx talk, and her favourite saying and the catchphrase that she's put out is, she has cerebral palsy, and she says, what does she say? She says, if I can't play Beyonce, Beyonce can't play me. And that's what I love about that kind of summary of that, people cannot play us kind of role. The other thing that comes to mind is, Kate, maybe you were exception to the rule with your neighbour's, character.
I don't think I was really. I think that Maxine was. She had. What is that thing you get when you smoke too much? Emphysema. She had emphysema, and so the writers kind of wrote the character into a corner because then you die, right? So the character just mysteriously ended. There was no final scene or teary goodbye or anything like that. It's just that they went, what do we do now? And so they did nothing. And so Maxine could come back, who knows, but probably not, I would say.
So the rest of the panel members, what does inclusion mean right now in this current context? For me, I don't like the word. I am ethically opposed against the word inclusion because it implies that we need to be included somewhere else. That's my personal perspective. But the levels of inclusion, and what does inclusion mean, and are we there yet? Are we not there yet? What's your thoughts? Any of you?
Okay, so Danielle Gallotta speaking. From my perspective, I think inclusion means opportunity. Inclusion meaning pathways. And in particular in the arts, I think we really need to open increasing pathways and opportunities. For example, Jack, the Creatability internship is just a start, but mainstream, including the Art Gallery of New South Wales, increasing opportunities for public-facing events on an equal platform to all other artists. You're invited as an artist to present on your practice. So I think we need more of that.
Just to echo what Danielle was saying, inclusion again I'm in film and TV, so I guess I'll talk from that. Inclusion in the kind of production of films and TV, even if it's not disability-related projects, more just, I interned at a production company, so employment for people with disabilities at companies, whether it be production companies or the art gallery or anything in the arts, is what I think of when I think of inclusion.
Can I just jump in there? I agree with you, Jack, and I actually prefer the term disability-led because I really do believe that until we have disabled artists leading other artists, things are never going to change. I mean, I'm still saying the same things that I was saying in 2012. Not much has really changed within the performing arts, and that's my jam. That's, the performing arts. So art galleries, I know nothing about really, but I do know that basically disabled people are seen as less than, and therefore disabled artists are seen as less than. And if disabled artists are seen as less than, they're not going to be employed as often as able-bodied artists. They're also going to be seen as unreliable because they're less than. We're troublesome. We demand things. A deaf person demands an Auslan interpreter. When I was working on Neighbours, had a buddy to open doors for me, to pass me the fork in the cafeteria, to do the things that everybody else could do themselves. But the point that I make here is that if the world is designed only for able-bodied people, it cannot be inclusive. And of course that applies to all of the arts. It cannot be inclusive if it's only designed for able-bodied people.
So access is at the core of inclusion. We know that here in New South Wales, we're stimulated to have access and inclusion plans for organisations, and the New South Wales government has put a template out for how to do those plans. And that keeps people safe because it means that we don't sweep our people off the table and out of the room in terms of these conversations. So at the core of inclusion is accessibility. So that's our given for this conversation. So we've got that straight now. So what I want to know now is down to the nitty-gritty of the targeted initiatives. So if inclusion means disability-led and an accessible environment to work in, how are we going right now with our targeted initiatives? So Jack, for example, how is the Creative Abilities internship for you?
I had an amazing experience with Creatability. Goalpost Pictures, who I worked with, they were a small team. There was only 8 people within the company, so I felt like I was able to get the most out of the internship and learn and be able to interact with everyone in the office. And I was able to, validate my skills that, I'd learnt throughout my studies in an environment that it was, that I'd trained for. I studied film studies at university and also went to North Sydney TAFE to do screen and sound. So I, have a wide array of skills that I was able to justify learning, I guess.
Mm-hmm. So how do we evaluate, this is a question for the whole panel, how do we evaluate a targeted initiative around disability? Is it worth it? Is it better to be an individual artist fighting for the cause and making work? Or is the targeted initiatives really like the most powerful way to create social change? Are there things that work? Are there things that don't work? Big questions.
Yeah.
Really big. I think that if I can hold forth about this one for a second, I think that disabled artists are siloed away and we make work which is often only seen by other disabled artists, and there is no understanding that a disabled artist could actually be a leader or could actually be a mentor to a non-disabled artist, for example. It's that less than thing, I think. I think that whatever we do, whatever we have done, we are seen as less than. And I think that is the thing that's got to change. The attitudinal barrier has got to change first, and then other things will follow.
Just quickly, I also think working within the system, if I would be so lucky to get a job with, say, a production company, working within and spreading awareness that, I'm not lesser, as, we've been using, and, they can see that, oh, Jack, he's got cerebral palsy, he's got the same skills as any other person who we would hire, and, look at it from that perspective.
Yeah, I reckon breathing the same air is really, really important. It's like Caroline Bowditch talks about being a trip hazard, and so she took an office once in the downstairs building of a major arts organisation in the UK because they had to walk past her every day and they had to see her as a short-statured woman in a wheelchair who was a dancer and a choreographer. It just became a normal part of everybody's existence. And I think that's our battle, Jack, actually.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think our battle is to be seen as normal. for disability to be seen as part of the human condition.
Danielle, what do you look for? I know you engage artists with disability in your work, and you often find spaces for artists with disability to be in the art gallery in several different ways of employment. What do you look for? How do you match that up? How does that work for you?
Can I firstly just make a comment about the targeted initiatives?
Totally, yeah.
I think in a major arts organisation like the Art Gallery of New South Wales, a targeted initiative is a very powerful tool. The creatability intern at the Art Gallery was Naomi Malone. And just going through the process of administering that creatability internship, really there was some cultural change just even in HR. Naomi Malone is a PhD student. She has 2 degrees. She has a law degree as well as a history degree. And inviting her in to transfer her academic skills into a museum environment, she's totally there. No, she knows her stuff. She knows her work. But it was around actually getting staff involved and understanding the slight adjustments that were needed. So I think as targeted adjustments in mainstream arts organisations are essential, and the fact that they were paid internships means that people being rewarded for honest work that they did just as anyone else had done. So the visibility and achieving those goals I thought were very important, so I hope that continues.
I think also, Danielle, just to add to that context, the Art Gallery has, as you mentioned, the Access and Inclusion Plan already sort of on its way. So it sounds like it was a safer environment to have those conversations and interactions as well. So Naomi was less of like a guinea pig in that sense, and so she was safer.
Definitely. And I think having a disability inclusion plan for example, for an arts organisation, it's as much to get the arts organisations transformed from the inside, creating that level of awareness, because I think the first thing is growing awareness. Mm-hmm. And once staff are aware, HR are aware, then you have policies that you can have a ripple effect and have change, and people want to be part of that movement and change. And I think that has happened at the gallery, and we're still moving forward. But in terms of disability-led practice, for example, for 20 years we had an Auslan program, and it was an Auslan program that was Auslan interpreted. And about 5 years ago, the numbers were dropping because it was just being presented by someone at the gallery and then being Auslan interpreted. And so we invited presenters from the deaf community, artists, writers, actors, to actually present those tools once a month. And we found that instantly the program was attracting 10, 20, 30, sometimes 35 people from the deaf community, but also from students learning Auslan. So we look at areas where we've created community consultation and we've worked with the sector, and it's scaffolded. So we're building forward, we're building steps. So we're also currently working with Front Up, the first Western Sydney disability-led arts and cultural Pathways to Practice program. And so each year we collaborate with Front Up and we work with a group of artists, and I can see some of them here today. And we work with those artists. They immerse themselves in the gallery with staff, with research, with working through the gallery, and then they work back at the hub at Seven Hills. They work on their own practice. They go through a mentorship program, and then they present back in the gallery. And because we've been associated since 2016, there's a cohort of artists that now we invite to lead workshops, but also get embedded in our mainstream programs, such as recollection talks, art after hours, where the artists who are familiar with the gallery, familiar with working with us and with our collection, feel comfortable to speak publicly to the wider general public. So we try and present a diverse range of artists.
That's such a great example of disability-led, Danielle. That's really amazing.
And that hasn't happened overnight. It's happened over a number of years, and with that community consultation and that DAP being bottom up, top down. So getting everyone from the executive, from our director, to our volunteer guides being trained in access awareness. Again, nothing's perfect. Things always need to constantly be reviewed and constantly initiating training and that open discussion.
Well, I mean, that's the thing, isn't it? Nothing is perfect. And we're in a state at the moment where there's such a kind of blank space around people with disabilities often, that people have a real reluctance to engage with that and to accept that maybe they don't have the expertise to deal with that person. And I think that, we need to be seen as people who can provide that expertise within the arts. And I think that is a really, really important shift of focus, which hasn't happened yet and needs to happen.
So how do we, Jackie, this question's for you, impact? How do we, from a researcher's perspective and from that kind of quantitative as well as quantitative researcher hat, what can we do? We're fighting the good fight, and organisations are doing good things in terms of targeted initiatives, but I'm not sure if we're talking about them well, or what do we do about impact and measuring impact?
Well, I'm so glad you asked, Sarah. Impact, we're currently the social impact evaluation partner for Creative Victoria, and they've got 2 programs going on down there called the Social Impact Program and the Diversity and Inclusion Program, both of which are very much focused on effecting social change through arts and creative industry interventions. So we've had a lot of time to think about this, and it's kind of what we think about anyway, because we're nerds. And what I would say about evaluation of impact in this space, it's twofold. One is to first and foremost consider the artistic impact of the work, because that's you're artists. You're artists creating art, and that's the primary relationship is between the art and the artist, and the art and the person who's experiencing the art. That's the primary relationship. So measure that impact qualitatively and quantitatively. And in that space, you're up against all the usual challenges of measuring the impact of the arts, but there are ways of doing it. And there's so much stuff out there now on how to do it, but to combine narrative, so you combine the story of change and the story of the experience and what someone goes through when they experience an arts show or piece of work, and the numbers. So you quantify it if you can. You ask that person how it has affected them, if it made them feel something, if it made them think in a different way, if it gave them new insights into human potential, which is one of my favourite ones when there's people with disability involved in an arts program. So there's the artistic and cultural impact, and then there's the social impact. And that is becoming increasingly important in an arts space as well. And that's where you're also looking at things like access and participation. And I would always recommend that you count, that you get your numbers, and you try and work out what, if any, impact X or Y initiative has had on actual numbers of people with disability in work and continuing opportunities for work and in leadership roles. Because if you don't have that, it's all just very positive goodwill sort of rhetoric. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
One of the things that Graham Innes used to say and still says is, if we're not counted, we don't count. Mm-hmm. And it's something that really, stayed with me when I heard him say that. From an organisational perspective, Danielle, how hard is it to count and create statistics in an organisation? I know one of the things that we all kind of grapple with is openly identifying as having a disability. And so that sort of gets in the way sometimes of statistics.
Yes, numbers. I'm not very fond on numbers in terms of number counting attendance.
Disgusted, Jackie.
No, narrative is numbers.
Excellent. But numbers in certain cases, for example, with funding, are important. Sometimes I think it's about the experience. The arts are about are created by people about their lived experience. And I agree, the social impact for me is probably more important than numbers. Being involved in a creative process or experiencing a creative performance or artwork, what you take away from it, what you understand about someone's lived experience about their life. I mean, how do we quantify that? I think
I can.
Go on, Jackie, go on.
Oh, but that's literally what we do, is quantify that. But we would always say you can't just present a bag of numbers. You have to give the story as well.
Exactly. I think there has to be a quantifiable but qualifiable approach as well. So asking people to explain, to give feedback rather than just counting numbers. But there's social impact on people's well-being, especially in the creative industries, for that self-expression, that acknowledgement. I think that is imperative within the arts, to have a diverse range of artists, because when people see themselves presented, it's affirmation.
Are you talking about disclosure, Danielle?
Yes, with disclosure.
Okay.
Recently with the Archibald Prize, we've actually put a little opportunity for people with the Archibald Wynne and Solomon prizes that are on at the moment, that when people submit an entry, they can actually identify if they have a disability. And again, that's around data collection. And someone might say, well, why are you asking that? Well, again, it's around statistics. We want to encourage artists from all ages and all abilities to apply, and perhaps if people see that if we can report on those stats, that might encourage other people then the following year to submit a work as well.
Disclosure's a really interesting thing from my point of view, and within the performing arts particularly. There are people I know who really don't want to disclose because they come from the point of view of, well, I'm a human being, so why should I have to tell you all about, this particular thing that is wrong with me? And, we don't necessarily feel shame about the fact that we have disability, and so it's a very complex question. Personally, I do disclose because I know that the makeup person and the costume person is going to want to know what they have to do to work with me, and the director is going to have to know what to do to work with me. So I think it's, for me, something that I do, but more of a conversation probably needs to be had about that from those with disability, I would say.
And it's about pride as well. It's disability culture and disability pride. So I've heard lots of stories about firstly, actually, the Australian Network on Disability actually doesn't use the word disclose anymore because it implies that it is a dirty secret. So it's actually just about sharing a part of identity that you are, and being proud about that. I imagine that representation on screen and stage also increases that pride in disability.
Well, I tend to think that once people see themselves represented on stage and screen, then they are themselves affirmed. And there's a pathway that suddenly springs open for them. I mean, I would love to think that somebody who sees a disabled person on stage and who has a disability can think about that as a pathway for them. But of course, there's the problem that our training institutions don't take people with disability or who are deaf. So the trainers need to be trained in how to work with people with disability. And that's a really kind of crunchy, difficult topic for people within the performing arts. And we're talking mainstream performing arts here.
Representation is the one thing that I'm very passionate about, and I should have mentioned that. You've just kind of opened up something in my mind that I hadn't really thought about, Kate, because I look at representation from the opposite side like not myself seeing someone with CP on the screen. Like I would never, you know, if I saw someone with cerebral palsy in a movie, I'd go, oh yeah, that's cool. But for me, it's the opposite for able-bodied people to get used to seeing people with disabilities. For me, it's like that's the best way to build awareness around people with disabilities, because I'm finding, you know, in recent months that a lot of people don't know about disability. Like they just they know, oh, you got to be nice to people with disabilities, and that's it. But they don't know specifics of how to interact with people with disabilities. And the best learning tool that I think people have is through media, you know, watching movies and TV shows. If there was a main character on Game of Thrones with, you know, cerebral palsy, people would know what that is because people would go and research it. It's the way that, you know, you get most eyes on something, especially through a mainstream.
Yeah, I agree.
But I'd never thought about, you know, the barrier to entry from the other end.
Yeah. I mean, for me, it's things like, you know, the MEAA, which is the Union for Actors and Journalists and some sporting bodies as well, has not yet done a disability action plan.
Yeah.
That is a huge barrier. How on earth can they possibly represent the interests of artists with disabilities if they don't do their own work? So a lot of the push that I'm doing by working in with the mainstream is getting people to acknowledge that they actually have to make change. It's not us that has to change. It's not us that has to fit in with their structures. It's the structures that have to change in order that everybody fits in with them.
So, quick rapid fire question: advocate or being employed, which is better?
For the numbers, being employed.
For the money, being employed.
Yeah. Being employed. I'm new to the advocacy thing, so being employed.
Oh, yeah. I think to have inclusion, you have to have employment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Amazing. So that's unanimous. What do you think, audience? Employment? Are you going to employ us?
Yeah.
We're up for hire. Shall we throw it to audience questions now? This was a real overview. I want to get really deeper though, so really ask some meaty questions, unless any of the panellists want to bring up anything else.
Can I just mention creative producers, directors, curators, in a way they're the gatekeepers, growing their awareness. And that's why just recently at the gallery we've had the national exhibition, and that's on at the MCA and the Carriage Works. And at the gallery we have an artist represented, Fayan Dievi, and at Carriage Works they have, I'll just skip on. Yes, Tom Roberts. And I think the two curators there, I'm sure at the MCA they have diverse artists as well represented this year. But the fact that those artists are, the curators searched and went out looking for contemporary, cutting-edge contemporary Australian art, and they surveyed what was out there, and they have put this platform out there, and they've included these two wonderful artists on equal footing to everyone else. They are contemporary artists and they are showing diversity. So it's the creative leaders who really will, in the end, we have all these great artists out there, but we need those directors and those curators to include them in their selection.
I would say that those gatekeepers, I would love to see some of those gatekeepers being people with disability.
Yeah.
I would love to see that. You know, why not? Why could Fayen not do that? She's amazing.
Yes.
I'm very fortunate because one of the outcomes of those targeted initiatives like the art gallery and Danielle, you being attuned to make sure that there is space and realising when someone is selected to really promote that and connect people. So one of the byproducts is that I got to meet Fayen for the first time, and she is very proud of being someone partially sighted. And it's very rare for me to meet another artist with partial sight or who is blind. So that's another capacity building aspect that can be easily measured from a targeted initiative as well. It's all about partnership, isn't it? I'm also reminded of something you said, I think, Jack. You know, there's a few people I always want to bring into conversations when we're facilitating these conversations, and one of the things that Stella Young said was no amount of smiling will ever change stairs into a ramp. Just want that recorded. Always drop it into every conversation because I think it's a very good, very good one to acknowledge. Yeah, let's open it up to questions, I reckon, from the audience. And really, yeah, anything is fine. Otherwise, I'll keep talking.
Hello everyone, Morwenna here, nice to see you. Thank you for the conversation so far. Kate, really good that you picked up on the training institution thing, and looking at least at the front half of the audience, I'm not sure I can see too many, if anyone, from a training organisation here. So I'm just wondering if you've got thoughts about how, how to get training institutions to care about this stuff. I feel like a lot of our cultural institutions are really starting to take it on board, but how do we get the training organisations to be part of conversations like this?
It's really slow. I think I've been doing some work with Safe Theatres in Melbourne, and so I had the privilege of being in the room with a lot of training institutions, mainstream, NIDA, WAPA, VCA, and really I think the problem is that we've got an ableist organisation within training institutions, which then leads to ableist organisation within the performing arts. How to change that? I think really we have to have quotas. I think that, drama schools and other training institutions need to take a certain percentage of deaf and disabled artists, just as a standard, and deal with it when they've done it. And I think that they need to, rather than considering themselves the experts in everything, they need to ask themselves, how does a deaf artist do Chekhov? How do I choreograph a wheelchair user? I mean, we have a wheelchair-using music theatre performer who's just won a Tony in the US. So it's possible. It's just that people have to take a one down, I think. They've got to say, okay, we don't know everything about absolutely everything, and we certainly don't know everything about disability. So we need to get some people in here with the lived experience so that we can consult with them and add to our knowledge, add to our expertise.
Can I chip in on that? I thoroughly agree that targets and quotas, i.e. numbers, are very effective. And I would say in terms of getting to that, sometimes the effective ways of change are around just like peer pressure and regulation are quite effective, and media attention tend to be things that affect social change at a kind of holistic level. So sometimes all you need is like one person in that sector, because it's not a big sector. One person in one of the major training institutions in a leadership role to just kind of go with it, like you saw Neil Peplow at Afters do with diversity and inclusion, actually. And that kind of led to all the other agencies kind of coming together and forming a screen diversity and inclusion network, and now they're looking at adopting some sort of reporting framework similar to what they're using in the UK. I mean, so if you just get one, Just get one on your side of the team, and that. But I'd also be going for regulation, and I'd also be going for media shaming. Actually, is actually more effective than media praising.
You heard it here first. Media shaming.
I mean, it's not that I'm into that, but it kind of does. It's quite effective. So
I'd like to say human rights complaint, but they're so tedious. Like it's 15 minutes to put in an application for a human rights complaint, so it's very easy for us to do. But it's a lot of emotional labour.
Yeah.
One of the things that Matt Fraser says in the podcast that's just released by Disability Arts Online and Grey Eye is that first we had to bully them, then we had to ask them, and now in the UK they're wanting to do something.
Yeah.
So
I mean, it's a way with power. You either take it or it's given to you, or you make it yourself. And so in this space, you're making it for yourself. You set up your own disability-led theatre company. In some situations that where you've got good people like Danielle, it's being kind of shared or given. But sometimes you do have to take it as well, and you have to demand it.
Yeah.
So it's got to be kind of come at it from all sides.
Being a unionist, I kind of think that we need to become a movement. The disability-led movement needs to exist in Australia because of the fact that I'm still saying the stuff that I was saying in 2012, you know. Enough already. It's now time for a change. And we have a Prime Minister who's just taken $1.6 billion out of the NDIS, which is a great support to people. Some of those people are artists.
I definitely couldn't be freelancing this year without the NDIS. There's no way.
Nor me.
Yeah. Which is the National Disability Insurance Scheme. We can explain that over drinks later because it's a longer conversation. Yeah.
So there's another question now.
Oh, great. Question, come. Bring it.
I have a comment and then a question. For people who don't know me, my name's Emily Dash. I've done quite a lot of training initiatives. I'm an artist, a theatre maker, a writer, and actor. One of the things I'm doing at the moment is I'm on residency with PAC, Centre for Emerging Artists, and I've created my own show. And what I got really excited about with doing that was the possibility to write stories for artists with disability. And I think one of the biggest barriers that I've come across in doing that is that I'm very, very committed to authentic representation and authentic casting. But I'm casting my show at the moment and finding it really difficult. And so what I've started thinking is that we really need to start at grassroots levels and get more people with disabilities, and particularly, if I can say this, high care, sort of profound disabilities interested in the arts, so then we can authentically represent their lived experience. And I wondered if any of the panel had any thoughts on how we could do that.
I'm looking at you, Kate. Emily, I've seen your posts on Facebook. I've seen your, you're seeking your actor for your show. Yeah.
Well, I mean, it always, for me, it comes back to creating a pathway. It comes back to making it possible for a creative person who's talented, who has any form of disability, to be able to do what they want to do, to be able to go to university, do a writing course, do an acting course, do a lighting course, produce. You know, it comes back to that for me. It also comes back to leadership, because if we see within the arts people with disabilities leading then it becomes possible for other people not to lead but to do other things, you know, and our work will burgeon.
Yeah.
We are a community that is always dependent on our oppressor. We are the community of diversity that has access requirements. That means that someone with a cultural identity can walk through this door and they want to feel welcome, they want good attitudes around them and processes to be inclusive. But sometimes our community can't walk through that door. So we might need different strategies. I'd be asking for more money, Emily, and flying someone from the UK to come do your show.
Yeah.
You might need different strategies because I've seen that you're looking for someone in Sydney and it might be that actually someone funds you to get the right person for that role, and that's one of the barriers that's part of our community, and so that's one of the things that you can legitimately ask for.
Yeah, I feel like that's a barrier in itself in terms of funding.
Yeah.
Yeah, make the Australia Council put their money where their mouth is.
We love you, Australia Council, though. You had the targeted initiatives as well for disability arts funding.
I'm doing my best in terms of funding, I can tell you that.
I can imagine. Because it does cost more. When we're looking for authentic casting, it is about access requirements, but it also is about finding the person, isn't it?
Yeah.
So it's about the per diems, it's the travel, it's about people who can't or need to travel with someone else as well. So it's that kind of thing.
It's about touring as well.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, how do you tour a show with a cast full of disabled people, disabled artists? I mean, I work with somebody who needs a hospital bed, you know, so the motel that we stay in has to provide that for her. So, yeah, it's a very big conversation.
I just wanted to ask a quick question and then add a statistic which may be of interest to Emily. I'll say the statistic and then I'll ask the question. So my statistic is that, I think numbers help, of course. So this number may be useful, that people who require assistance with one or more core activities currently represent more than half of people with disability, about 60%. And there were just over 4,000 people with that need in creative and cultural occupations, and about 3,000 in the creative industries in general. And proportionally, that's lower than for the general labour force. So people with high care needs are even less represented in the arts than they are in the general labour force and then other artists with disability. So if that was tracked over time, you know, that would be a useful thing to hold people to in terms of reporting. Now my question was for anyone from the Australia Council or Create New South Wales, David and Adrian, if you're here, if there is there some sort of way that someone like Emily could apply for quick response sort of funding for that kind of thing at the moment, or?
So it's Adrian from the Australia Council and SAMAG, two hats. Not a quick response one that I'm aware of, but certainly targeted initiatives, and we'd certainly welcome a conversation.
Cool.
But yeah, not a quick turnaround right at the moment.
Your show is important, Emily. It is important to have people with complex needs on stage and screen, absolutely. Also within the targeted initiatives, we know a lot of arts and disability companies globally that choose the easy disability when they're casting, and that's not actually okay. So it's really important to have the representation within our own disability community as well, within the targeted initiatives. You know, when I went to the UK to the Unlimited Festival, I was deeply saddened by the fact that the disability community itself didn't understand access requirements for blind people, and that gutted me, and I don't want to see that replicated in Australia. So it's really important to have that diversity even within the targeted approaches.
Can I mention, just shining a light on opportunities, Emily, you're looking for people now, but if we step back or forward, in the education system for young people and children with disability, the arts education and the opportunities to theatre performance and acting in that school programming, if there's support units or specific purpose schools, a lot of the students may not be getting those experiences and in the arts, and it's really important that if we're looking forward for growing an arts community, that that people get that wider arts experience through their education system, because then there are pathways for when people leave schools and then further on into their tertiary education.
I think it's really important that those school experiences actually lead somewhere as well.
Exactly.
So that, you know, people can actually have a trajectory planned out for their lives.
Speaking of
within
leading
the
somewhere,
arts.
Jack,
Yes.
where's your what's next for you in terms of like after doing an internship? What's the pathway forward?
Yeah, that's a good question. That's what I've been thinking about for the last couple of months. I guess in terms of film work, I guess I've been thinking about paving my own way in terms of writing projects, smaller kind of independent guerrilla things that I like to do because they're easier and I can kind of build up experience, as well as then looking for work within production companies that I can, you know, wave around. Oh, I did the creatability internship, you know, I've got kind of a experience working for a production company. I'm low maintenance, you know, you don't need to really worry about access needs too much for me. So I can kind of shop around, hopefully, to various production companies around Sydney. And yeah, hopefully. That's
Cool.
Sarah, we have another question from the floor.
Great. Bring it.
Hi Sarah, it's Michael Turkic speaking. I'm in love with audio describing since I've heard it tonight. And I'd love to audio describe myself as George Clooney, for those who don't know. If you prepare me a rare moment of vanity. My partner, William Lee, and myself represent International Casting and Creative Management. We are, I think, the only agency in the country that represents artists of non-Anglo-Saxon heritage, along with artists living with disability. Everything you've all said tonight, I hear on a daily basis in my role of being the control tower, trying to land planes and get them to take off and load them up with passengers and make sure everyone can be lifted up and safely delivered. A lot of what you've said tonight, this is more of a resonation from what we hear every day from the deaf disability community. Pathways are incredibly important. Quotas are incredibly important. Militancy is incredibly important. We will get nowhere, you will get nowhere without fighting for it. And the reason I say that is because there are examples all around the world in the performing arts where unless there is positive discrimination, nothing will happen because it's outside people's comfort zone, the ableist community comfort zone. Kate mentioned currently there's an actress, female on Broadway, who's been nominated for a Tony Award. She's a wheelchair user. She's a supporting lead in Oklahoma on Broadway. We've had Keith Robinson, a wheelchair-using actor here, a NIDA graduate, play at Belvoir Street Theatre. As Jim Sharman, the famous film director, Rocky Horror Picture Show, once said, what will fix the Australian film industry? And he said, one good film. So we need those good examples. The recent production of the musical Spring Awakening on Broadway had deaf actors signing and singing with able-bodied and non-deaf actors, playing dual characters in a commercial production on Broadway. Why can't we do that here? Why don't we do it here? Because we're not using our... we've got our ableist body glasses on, yeah? And people with disability are still largely invisible to this industry. People with disability are paying tax. That tax is going to support people cripping up. People with disability are paying tax, and that goes to the Australian Opera to present people yellowed up in The King and I and browned up in West Side Story. That is fucking insane. I'm sorry, I'm really angry about this. And this is what I take every day to the phone when I see a casting that says, we want to cast Norm Jones. And I write back and say, great, I've got an actor who's from, you obviously didn't mean Chinese Norm Jones because you obviously were saying it has to be an Anglo-Saxon person. Bell Shakespeare Company puts out a brief that says we want actors with 3 years training or 3 years experience. And I email them back and say, did you mean 3 white years or 3 ableist years? Because it would take a disabled actor in this or actor living with disability 10 years to get the same amount of credits. So everything is designed to work against where we want to be. And you fight by ringing your local member, by getting them along to projects, by making good projects. That will address the problem by quotas. People of colour have not been able to be represented in the theatre unless there's positive discrimination, because white people are allowed to be people of colour, but people of colour aren't allowed to be themselves. So unless there's that positive discrimination, it will not change. How do we get things to change? We get banners, we storm, we block roads. We say to council, stop funding people that are yellowing up and cripping up and whiting up. It's not on anymore. Yeah? Thanks.
This is an important moment in our social movement. The anger in the room is great and we welcome it. And I also want to say that I think this is one of the SAMAGs where we've got the most people with disability in the room. And so I want to welcome you all here as well. Yeah, we do. We have to keep fighting. It takes a toll. One of the really good initiatives for me that, you know, I've been through a lot of initiatives to get where I've gotten on in my arts practice and also my arts management and access practice. And I found that the Create New South Wales Fellowship last year was exceptionally good for saying, yes, keep fighting, we're going to give you some money to do what you need to do. And so flexible arrangements for us to do what we need to do are also incredibly good to keep up that fight, because we need the stamina for it, and the allies like yourself, Michael, as well. Yeah, we're still in that, in terms of bullying and asking and people giving to us, we are still in the bullying phase. We do need to fight. One of the perspectives I'm really enjoying watching at the moment is Carly Finlay's work. I'm very much enjoying reading her Facebook posts and how she's talking about emotional labour and how she talks about the real life situations that she faces. In her book, Say Hello, which you should all purchase because it's a good book, but also just the way that she's very real on social media, and I think that's also causing ripple effects of change.
Yeah, she talks about microaggressions, which I find really interesting because all disabled people, deaf and disabled people, encounter microaggressions every day of their lives. Would you say that's true, Sarah?
Yeah, absolutely. And major aggressions. Yeah. I went to a dance company last week and tried to do their class, and it was just, it ended up in tears and I couldn't even do the class. And I've just done a fellowship on dance. So I come back here and get super aggression actually as well. You know.
Sarah, we've got another question.
Yeah,
we've probably
great.
got time just for one or two before we wrap it up.
Wonderful.
Hi guys, Dan here, theatre director, identified with a disability. I think it's very interesting what you were just saying, Michael, about this time about in 10 years. A couple of weeks ago, one of the major theatre companies, I've actually already got, inverted commas, my master's in directing, but I've been in a dreadful, what I classify dreadful position, that I feel I need to do more training to be accepted. And I've actually been accepted to one of the top drama schools, but trying to explain to them 6 months in advance what needs I have without feeling, and this is someone who's proud of their disability, but without feeling a sense of shame. Like I've had some people we all know in the sector, mainstream sector, saying to me, you know, you would be a lot further along, Dan, if you didn't have this disability. And I'm saying, yep, I'm fully aware of that. But how do we change, just what you're saying, that attitude that we get to, like I'm on the co-chair with Kate on this committee, and what we are trying to promote is basically it's a dreadful thing is I always feel I have to say to people, actually, I'm a trained director. Instead of I'm doing this fun piece of theatre, if you know what I'm trying to say. And it's trying to find that balance basically where obviously I'm going over late on actually this October to do a fellowship on disability in arts and the special access departments. And when we are in a position that one of the majors, and it's only one of the two to pick up from, in Sydney informed me when I say to them what I am trying to do is bring back what they can do to support, employ artists with disability. And when I'm told, in all seriousness, but Dan, such and such, artistic director, believes there's no need for the accessibility department because we are all about inclusivity anyway. And I said, what actually is that inclusivity? and then you quickly change the subject. And it's the dreadful thing is not trying to cause that trouble, but feeling we have to, because if we don't, it's making kind of like my work, if you saw my work, it's not defined by my disability. Ironically, 2 pieces I am doing are on disability. But the reason is because I think it's so funny what I'm coming out with today, and this is not a criticism to anyone here, but pretty much I'm seeing the same people that I know who are allies or as well as artists with disability.
I think that's okay though, Dan, because we've got to stick together.
Absolutely.
So I don't mind having the same conversations over, because we actually really have to get a solidified, unified voice that is unshakable. And I think we're getting there, and that's what I'm really excited about tonight. I'm also excited that you got into your course, so congratulations for that. That's amazing. And also the thing about, we started the conversation with inclusion, and you can't have inclusion without access. So anyone who says, yeah, we're being inclusive, we're being inclusive, if they haven't mentioned access, then they're wrong. One of my career experiences was choosing which fringe festivals to put my solo show in, and I made an executive decision not to go for Adelaide Fringe because they don't have an access role, but to instead put my show in Melbourne Fringe, which did have an access role within the Fringe, and from that I was able to get the Green Room Award. But that wouldn't have happened. I would have got no awards at Adelaide, so that access role is vital.
And that the Melbourne Fringe position is funded through the Disability and Inclusion Program, which Creative Victoria has, which came out of Creative State. So these things, if agencies have to report against them, then they do them.
Yep. Yep. I love your numbers.
Thank you very much.
You can come back again, Jackie.
Both. But you do need a bit of both.
One more question, was it? One more question?
Any more questions from the floor?
Or any more?
Because we're about time. Oh, yep.
I was just, hi, my name's Timothy. I'm from Campbelltown Arts Centre, and I was just wondering what you think of the title of The Last Avant-Garde.
Mm-hmm. So the title of The Last Avant-Garde is a phrase that has rippled through our history. It's a phrase that's been used a few times, and it was coined by the live arts movement that suggests that people with disability create innovative work. So because of my access requirements with my eyesight, I'm going to create a piece of theatre that is deep and meaningful and potentially something that you haven't seen before, because my experience on this earth is unique. So that's what I take from The Last Avant-Garde. It is a phrase that's used in research, like Kath Duncan's research, which is super exciting, and it gives us a bit of status and value, because we actually do create something quite spectacularly cool. That's my take on it.
I agree.
Unanimous? Yeah. With every phrase, it can be done to death. So just be careful of not overusing it, but definitely the value in it is still very strong at the moment. So go forth and hire us, because we'll give you avant-garde. And it's good, it's not risky, it's good.
I reckon all good art is risky, actually.
Okay, good, I take it back. Can I do my glass walking now?
Yeah, absolutely. Embrace risk, that's what I say.
Yeah.
So I think that's it for questions.
Okay, great. So we'll wrap it up then. There are drinks in the bar afterwards. 107 has been an amazing partner of SAMAG, and please do stick around in the foyer and chat to us more, and chat to all the other artists with disability more in the room, because we're the ones that hold the knowledge, and our allies are the ones that hold the amazing stats and research and initiatives. So thank you so much. One day we'll hold them as well. But yeah, we're delighted that you all came today. Maybe do we want to finish off with a quick, what needs to change, or are we done? I'm not sure. I can't suss it out. What should we do?
Oh, I reckon we can kind of say a sentence each.
Yeah, all right, cool. Kate, you're now co-facilitating with me. We like to do it in buddies. All right, so from each panel member, one quick rapid fire, what needs to change? No particular order, the wish list of today and tomorrow. And then let's go drink.
You know what I'm going to say? Just get a baseline, report against it, you know?
Excellent. Oh, look, I don't even know how to answer that question. I posed it. I just want to be welcomed when I walk through the door and say I'm partially sighted and not be labelled as aggressive by sticking up for what I actually is my rights.
In my ideal world, we would see artists with disability in all aspects of the arts. And in the performing arts, we would see producers, directors, writers, performers as a standard.
For me, it's just more awareness and representation of people with disabilities in general, but in the arts specifically, just so everyone can learn.
From my perspective, more opportunities for disability-led practice and gatekeepers providing more opportunities for artists.
So each one of us will have our manifesto, go forth and discuss it in the foyer. There are lots of key measurements for that we can all put out there, maybe on Facebook, I don't know. You know, Matt Fraser says in the podcast that his measurement is that someone wins a BAFTA, you know. So there are lots of measurements that we can use to mark success. Upcoming events, just a quick plug, Daniel Monks' Q&A when he's in the country doing his Sydney Theatre Company thing. That's one that I want to flag with everyone. That's a nice one for Sydney. And then there's Arts Activated in August and Meeting Place in December. And Meeting Place being Canberra, Arts Activated with our partners for Accessible Arts for this event. That will be in Homebush. And let's have more of these conversations because really we need this united voice. So thank you very much for coming and we'll see you outside.
Okay.